Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about Robert Boyle,
Ah, Robert Boyle.
a giant of 17th century science.
That giant.
We're using excerpts from Spanish biography
Okay.
titled 46 Boyle, La Ley de Boyle .pdf as our guide.
Cool.
So get ready for a journey back to a time when the foundations of chemistry were being laid.
You're stepping into a period where the old ways of alchemy were giving way to this new experimental approach.
Yeah.
And Boyle was right at the heart of that shift.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think how our understanding of the world has evolved.
Totally.
To kick things off, let's explore Boyle's early life and education.
Sure.
Born into an aristocratic family in Ireland.
Privileged upbringing.
He had a unique upbringing.
He did.
Oh.
So unlike many scholars of his time,
Right.
Boyle didn't receive a formal university education.
So he was not going to Oxford or Cambridge.
Nope.
Interesting.
He had private tutors and traveled extensively,
Oh, wow.
crafting his own personalized learning journey.
It's almost like a self-designed independent study program,
Very much so.
which really speaks to his thirst for knowledge.
Absolutely.
Even in his youth, he was drawn to instruments like telescopes and microscopes.
Yeah, he always wanted to see for himself,
Yeah.
to observe and investigate directly.
It seems like he always wanted to get his hands dirty.
Yes, very hands-on approach.
Yeah.
A key element of his scientific method, but it wasn't just a matter of observing.
Right.
Boyle was deeply influenced by the ideas of Francis Bacon,
Francis Bacon.
who championed observation and experimentation as the path to true knowledge.
A true revolutionary in the scientific world.
Yes, he was.
And Boyle took those ideas to heart.
To heart.
He even developed a list of 20 future scientific advancements
Wow.
he believed were possible,
20.
which he called desiderata.
Now, what's fascinating here is that many of those predictions have actually come true.
Really?
Prolonging life flight, underwater exploration, and even the transmutation of metals. These were not just whimsical ideas, but a testament to his visionary thinking and his understanding of the potential of scientific inquiry.
Some of those desiderata, especially the transmutation of metals, sound a bit like alchemy, though.
Right?
Was he straddling a line between traditional alchemy and this emerging scientific method?
He certainly lived in a time when those boundaries were blurred,
Right.
but his commitment to rigorous experimentation set him apart.
Oh,
He wasn't content with simply accepting ancient wisdom.
right.
He wanted to test, to measure, and to understand through empirical evidence.
And that brings us to a critical tool in his scientific arsenal,
Oh, yes.
the air pump. This was like the must-have gadget for any serious scientist in the 17th century, right?
It was indeed a revolutionary instrument.
Okay.
Boyle didn't invent the air pump, but he significantly improved upon existing designs.
Okay.
With the help of his assistant, Robert Hooke.
Of course.
With this improved air pump, he was able to create vacuum as a concept almost unimaginable at the time.
Can you imagine witnessing a vacuum being created for the first time?
I know.
Must have seemed like manipulating the very fabric of reality.
It would have been mind-blowing.
What kinds of groundbreaking experiments did they conduct with this device?
One experiment that really captured the imagination involved placing a ticking clock inside a vacuum chamber.
Oh.
When the air was removed, the ticking sound disappeared.
No.
This demonstrated in a very tangible way that sound cannot travel without air.
That's a concept we often take for granted, but to see it proven in such a dramatic way must have been mind-blowing for people at the time.
Absolutely. They also demonstrated the need for air in flight.
Okay.
By placing an insect inside the vacuum, they observed that it was unable to fly because there was no air to push against for lift.
Interesting. So these experiments with the air pump were more than just curiosities.
Right.
They led Boyle to one of his most significant discoveries, something we now know as Boyle's Law.
You're talking about a fundamental law in physics and chemistry describing the relationship between the pressure and volume of a gas.
Right. To illustrate this, imagine you're diving deep underwater.
Okay.
As you descend, the pressure around you increases, causing the air in your lungs to compress, reducing its volume.
Exactly.
That, in essence, is Boyle's Law.
The more pressure you apply to a gas, the smaller its volume becomes, and vice versa.
Okay, so it's an inverse relationship.
Precisely. Boyle meticulously designed an experiment using a J-shaped tube to measure this relationship.
Right.
He trapped a volume of air in the shorter arm of the tube and then added mercury to the longer arm, increasing the pressure on the trapped air.
Interesting. And that's how he observed and documented this inverse relationship between pressure and volume,
Exactly.
laying the groundwork for a principle that's still fundamental to our understanding of gases today.
He didn't express it mathematically, though.
Oh.
It was the French physicist Edmé Mariotte who later put a mathematical formula to Boyle's findings. That's why it's sometimes referred to as the Boyle-Mariotte law.
It's a testament to the collaborative nature of science, where discoveries often build upon the work of others across time and borders. But Boyle's contributions extended far beyond the air pump and this pivotal law. He was also a prolific writer.
One of his most impactful works was The Skeptical Chemist,
Okay.
where he challenged some of the core beliefs of alchemy.
Right.
For centuries, the Aristotelian theory of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, had dominated scientific thinking.
Right.
But Boyle questioned this long-held belief.
It took real courage to challenge those established views.
It did.
What did he propose instead?
He advocated for a corpuscular theory of matter. This is the idea that matter is composed of tiny, indivisible particles.
Okay.
In essence, he was laying the groundwork for our modern understanding of atoms.
Wow. So Boyle was a visionary
He was.
who helped shape the very foundations of modern chemistry.
Absolutely.
But he also wasn't afraid to delve into areas that might seem a bit more esoteric to us today. That's what makes his story so fascinating.
It is.
He was a man of science, but he wasn't bound by rigid categories.
And that's where his exploration of alchemy comes in. A topic that reveals a more nuanced and perhaps surprising side of this scientific pioneer.
This is where we'll pick up in part 2. Until then, keep those minds curious.
Stay curious. Welcome back to our exploration of Robert Boyle's life and work.
We've just scratched the surface of his scientific contributions.
Boyle wasn't just focused on air and matter. His curiosity extended to many other areas.
He was what you might call a scientific polymath.
Yeah, from color to gems to minerals to the nature of cold, it seems his interests were incredibly diverse.
So, how did he manage to keep all of these investigations organized? He was incredibly prolific, and I'm curious how he structured his research.
That's a great question, and it highlights another fascinating aspect of Boyle's approach to science, his meticulous organization.
I remember reading about his use of titles or headings to categorize his research. It sounds like he was a pioneer not just in scientific inquiry, but also in information management.
Think of it as an early form of knowledge mapping.
He would break down complex topics like his study of blood into smaller subtopics, each with its own set of questions and experiments.
Exactly. This systematic approach allowed him to tackle large and multifaceted research questions in a methodical and comprehensive way.
Now, speaking of blood, that brings us to an intriguing area of Boyle's work. His fascination with blood might seem a bit morbid at first glance, but it reveals his forward-thinking approach to medicine.
Remember, in the 17th century, understanding of the human body was still largely based on ancient Greek theories like the four humors.
Which, to our modern ears, sounds more like astrology than medicine.
But Boyle wanted to move beyond these traditional ideas and apply his knowledge of chemistry to understand the properties and composition of blood.
It's amazing to think that he was already considering blood transfusions, a procedure that wouldn't become commonplace for centuries.
His interest in transfusions speaks to his willingness to push the boundaries of medical knowledge, even though the risks were considerable at the time.
It's clear that Boyle's influence extended far beyond his own laboratory. He was a key member of the Royal Society, a newly formed group of scientists dedicated to advancing scientific knowledge.
Within the Royal Society, he advocated for open scientific inquiry, the sharing of research findings, and the importance of collaboration.
It sounds like he was laying the groundwork for the kind of international scientific community we have today.
Absolutely. He recognized that scientific progress is a collective endeavor.
Now, before we delve into the more enigmatic side of Boyle, his alchemical pursuits, I want to circle back to Boyle's law for a moment.
Of course, it's such a fundamental concept, and it's worth revisiting to ensure we have a solid grasp of its implications.
I have to admit, even though we've talked about it already, I'm still a bit fuzzy on the specifics of how he actually demonstrated this law through experimentation.
Let's return to that ingenious J-shaped tube experiment.
I'm picturing now the air trapped in one arm of the tube, the mercury being added to the other.
By adding mercury, Boyle increased the pressure on the trapped air, and what he meticulously observed and documented was how the volume of that air decreased in direct proportion to the increasing pressure.
It's like an invisible dance between pressure and volume one pushing the other back.
That's a great way to visualize it, and remember, this was all done without the sophisticated instruments we have today. It was meticulous observation and careful measurement that led to this breakthrough.
It's a testament to the power of simple yet elegant experiments to unlock profound truths about the natural world.
And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Boyle's life, one that might seem at odds with his reputation as a champion of the scientific method, his involvement with alchemy.
It's time to explore this seemingly contradictory side of Boyle, the skeptical chemist, who is nonetheless drawn to the mysteries of alchemy.
Are you ready to unravel this intriguing thread?
Let's dive in. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and world of Robert Boyle.
We're about to step into a realm that might seem a bit unexpected, especially considering Boyle's reputation as a champion of the scientific method.
You're talking about his alchemical pursuits.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting to think about how someone so dedicated to observation and experimentation
I know, right?
could be drawn to a field often associated with mysticism and the occult.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? To
Yeah.
understand Boyle's interest in alchemy, we need to remember that in the 17th century, the line between alchemy and chemistry was far less defined than it is today.
Right.
It was a time of great intellectual ferment, a time when the old ways of thinking were being challenged by new discoveries and perspectives.
A real crossroads in the history of science.
Precisely. And alchemy, with its long tradition of experimentation and its focus on the transformation of matter, still held a powerful sway over the minds of many scholars, including Boyle.
So while he was critical of many aspects of traditional alchemy, he was also intrigued by its potential.
He saw both the limitations and the possibilities.
He was particularly drawn to the idea of transmutation. Ah, yes. The age-old dream of transforming one substance into another.
Like turning lead into gold.
Exactly. Imagine the implications if you could truly change the very nature of matter.
It does sound a bit like magic.
It does have that allure, doesn't it?
But I'm guessing Boyle approached this with a more scientific mindset.
Absolutely. He wasn't interested in creating gold from lead or discovering an elixir of immortality. His goals were more about understanding the fundamental building blocks of matter and their potential for manipulation.
So what were some of the specific alchemical experiments he conducted?
He experimented with a wide range of substances, meticulously documenting his procedures and observations in his notebooks. He was especially interested in the properties of metals and their reactions with various chemicals.
It's that commitment to careful documentation that makes him such a compelling figure.
Absolutely.
Whether he was studying air blood or the more esoteric elements of alchemy, he approached it all with a scientist's eye for detail.
A true pioneer of the scientific method.
Some scholars believe that Boyle's alchemical explorations actually influenced his later work in chemistry.
That's an intriguing idea.
I can see how his experiments with transmutation might have informed his development of the corpuscular theory of matter, the idea that all matter is composed of tiny particles.
It's a compelling connection. His alchemical investigations may have planted the seeds for his understanding of the building blocks of the universe.
So while he was skeptical of the more mystical aspects of alchemy, he was able to extract valuable insights from its experimental practices.
He was truly a bridge between the old world of alchemy and the emerging field of modern chemistry.
We've explored the many facets of Robert Boyle's life and work, from his aristocratic upbringing and unconventional education to his groundbreaking experiments on air and his intriguing alchemical pursuits.
It's been quite a journey.
We've seen how he challenged long-held beliefs, developed new theories, and laid the foundation for modern chemistry.
A true giant of science.
He was a man of contradictions, a devout Christian who embraced the scientific method, a skeptical chemist who saw value in alchemical experimentation.
A complex and fascinating figure.
But above all, he was a brilliant and inquisitive mind, a true pioneer who helped to usher in a new era of scientific understanding.
His legacy continues to inspire us today.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Robert Boyle and that you've gained a new appreciation for his enduring legacy.
It's been a pleasure sharing his story with you.
His story reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge is a journey often filled with unexpected twists and turns.
And that true scientific progress requires both a willingness to question the status quo and a commitment to rigorous observation and experimentation.
Until next time, keep your minds curious and never stop exploring the wonders of the world around you.
Farewell from the deep dive.